What's up, everybody? Happy 2019. Thank you for tuning in for the beginning of what will be these weekly installments of Tuesday's tutorials. So go ahead and get your questions ready, ask them in that first post of mine, and we already have quite a few questions on tap. So let's go ahead and jump right into those. And I'm also going to address a couple things that have happened in the last couple days that people have asked me about regarding copyright infringement and Instagram and things like that. So let's go ahead and jump right in, and I'm going to go look at those questions now. Quick answer to this, I don't know. It depends on how long I get bored. The last time I got bored, I let it grow for, 2 years, I suppose. So we'll see. Maybe one day you'll tune in, it'll be gone. In my line of work, I use the 70-200 f2.8 version 2 lens and also the 16-35 version 3 f2.8 lens as well. If I had to choose one, it'd probably be this one, the 70-200. Now, what I'm doing is adding a link so you guys can go on to my page and see the lenses that I use, the camera bodies that I use, memory cards, memory card reader, and all that stuff. So if you want to go ahead and swipe up, you can hit my page and see what I use. Sure, first and foremost, be relentless. Don't just send a portfolio once, send it 5, 6, 7, 8 different times. Find out who the editors are and submit your work to them, either online or in print. Next, think about the timeline and images that you are submitting. In other words, magazines are publishing, 3 months ahead of time at least. So in the summertime, you're looking at fall and even winter type images. And finally, be honest with yourself about your images. Take a look at the magazines that you're trying to get into. And if you feel like your images are up to par with their images, then go ahead and submit. But if they're not, then continue to work on your craft. 2 things come to mind here: visual cohesiveness and themes. So you're selecting images in small part that represent the stronger body of work that you're displaying in your gallery. If you don't have a curator to do that, then you're going through and selecting. So for example, it's not selecting 50 images that are all black and white. It's selecting 50 images that collectively work together to tell a story. So what does a day in the life of branding look like, or what does it look like over 10 years? Or selecting 50 images that tell the branding story over the course of 10 years. You're looking at communicating visually and cohesively in your exhibit. Well, talk about a deep question for 2019. The short answer is, yeah, absolutely, I doubt my abilities. I think it's just general nature for us to walk out there and go, what the hell am I doing out here? And then your gut takes over. There are a whole host of variables that go into beating us down that make us doubt our abilities. From people that have been in a trade for a certain period of time that say, well, if you didn't learn the way I did, then you're no good. Or if you don't have this degree or that certification, or if you're not a part of this group or that group, then you must not be any good. And people will say that all the time. But it's those of us that have the ability to step out on our own and put ourselves out there, to be vulnerable and know that what we're doing is right and what we're doing comes from within us. That's the hard part. And yeah, that always makes me doubt myself. Now, outside of the influences, that the voices that kind of try and keep you down, there's a technical side of it, like shooting a wedding on Saturday. When the bride comes down the aisle, the only thing going through my head is, don't F this up. There's another part of this in the beginning when I said, when I go out on location or I'm in studio, whatever, and I ask myself, what the hell am I doing? You learn to trust your gut, and that takes time and experience as well. Over time, we learn to trust our gut, and so for me, regardless of the situation I find myself in, I'm constantly taking what I call a visual inventory of the scene and seeing where the best images are going to be. What I'm doing by taking that visual inventory is actually just building confidence up, knowing that I can rely on the natural light that's out there or create my own light and make those images for the clients that I need to. And finally, the last thing that helps me build confidence, that gets that what the hell am I doing question out of my head, is wearing my Superman t-shirt. Nah, just kidding. That was a fantastic question, and I just really want to sincerely thank you for asking it, because we talk about those deep, dark places that we don't want to talk about, and the reality is, at one point in time, we'll always doubt our abilities. Thank you for the compliment. No, I don't live out there, but I have had some people ask me to come live out there so I can take pictures of them. What you're doing is taking that visual inventory of the scene. You're analyzing where the light is coming from, where you can be relative to your subject, and of course, where you're going to be so you're not in the way. Many times now, years later, I can pretty much be wherever I want to be with the people that I shoot with. The truth of the matter is, I wouldn't be able to get the images I do without those around me, without the trust of those around me. And, it's one thing to have access, but it's a whole nother ballgame when you're accepted. So a big thank you to everyone. I want to spend a few minutes and talk about the tripods because I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. Real quickly though, I use a Manfrotto 055 XB tripod and then also a ball head attached to that. Generally speaking, a tripod will come in one, the stand, the legs, and then number two, the heads that you can put on it. And there's ball heads, two-way heads, three-way heads, geared heads, and then there's packages. You don't have to spend a fortune on your tripod, but there are some that will exceed $500, especially when you start getting into the carbon fiber tripods. Now, it reduces a lot of weight, and that's a big deal, but you will pay for that. The current tripod that I use, that Manfrotto 055 XB, I've had that for almost 10 years. I broke one leg, but it continues to work. I do need to buy a new one, but it'll be a little bit of time. Thank you very much for the compliment. And I'll say this over and over. I know it sounds cliche when I say that online, and I thank you for your compliment, but truly, if you were here with me, shake your hand and sincerely know that I do appreciate it. This is a good question. Shooting in manual can be so foreign, especially when we don't have a thorough understanding of what the exposure triangle is, because all of those settings can be so overwhelming to us, but I have a perfect answer. I have a dear friend here with me, and she's going to take over and tell you the best way to learn to shoot in manual.
Just do it. It's very scary to get it off of automatic mode, but once you start going out there and using the manual mode, so yeah, just get out there with your camera and shoot anything. Just use the manual mode and read up on the exposure triangle like he's saying. It's the only way to get better.
Thanks, Mandy. What Mandy said is absolutely correct. You just have to do it. Yes, you want to understand that exposure triangle that consists of aperture, shutter, and your ISO, but the biggest thing that you can do to help yourself is just get out there and do it. And since it is Tutorial Tuesday, we're going to go through a basic exposure triangle exercise. And we're going to explain what aperture is and what it does for us, what shutter speed is and what it does for us, and what that dirty little ISO is and what it does for us. Aperture 101. Our aperture determines how much light is being let down our lens that reaches our camera sensor. And number two, it determines what's called the depth of field, or how much or how little, or the acceptable focus within an image. When we're talking about our aperture, the terms that are used are things like f-stop and even aperture. So somebody will say, oh, what was your f-stop, or what was your aperture on that picture? Well, we look at things like 2.8 is a big hole and f8 is a small hole. Why is it important to know that f2.8 is a big hole and f8 is a small hole? It's important because f8 provides a greater depth of field and 2.8 provides a shallow depth of field. On to the second pillar of exposure, and that is shutter speed. Shutter speed determines how long light is able to hit our sensor, and it also determines whether or not you want to freeze somebody's rope in the air or if you want to blur it. Finally, as far as Exposure 101 goes, we talk about ISO. Now, ISO determines our camera's sensors' sensitivity to light, but the trade-off is the higher ISO we shoot at, the grainier our image is. Let's put those exposure basics to practical use. At a wedding I was shooting this weekend, there was very dim light as she was coming down the aisle. So I had to increase my ISO. I had to shoot at a wide aperture at 2.8 to reach a shutter speed that would stop her. One more real-world example of exposure basics. In a silhouetted image like this of Renee, what I'm looking at is a shutter speed of like 1/2000th of a second, ISO 100 at f4. The last thing that I'll say here about exposure is you get to decide what that is, and where that gets decided is right in here. It's your creativity. A creative exposure is an authentic expression of our artistic vision. The answer to this is it depends on the job. So some of them go directly to my website and others will go to a Dropbox folder, but primarily I use Dropbox. Hey Jesse, thanks for sharing that compliment. I really do appreciate it. And I don't know, from my side of things, you know, the engagements and the bridals and of course the wedding pictures were just a ton of fun. So thank you to Emily and also Burke and your families. I've added a link to my page where I recommend a couple lower end cameras, the Canon T6 N7i. You're going to spend $500 to $700 on those, but I also have another option. The other option is this. I have an original Canon 5D. It has 44,000 shutter clicks on it, and I'm selling it for $350. And if you want it, go ahead and contact me and I'll work it out with you. This is a really good question. We use Medallis Medical here in Utah, and I don't know if it's available nationwide, but that Affordable Care Act is not affordable for us, especially being self-employed. Hi Julie, thanks for the questions. The first thing that you should do is get a business license. It's not that expensive, and having limited funds, it's actually pretty reasonable to have that annual license. And then the next thing you should As far as the next thing you should do, the classes and the equipment really should kind of run parallel with each other. You'll spend more time sometimes on education, and then you'll make a big purchase to get maybe a full-frame camera and some lenses. But the education is always going to be part of your continuing process or your continuing journey. I even take some nowadays, whether that be on YouTube or Creative Live or something like that, but it's ongoing. Hey look, when I started out, I also had basic equipment. I grew out of it, and that was a good thing. Then I made investments into my future, into equipment that I can grow into, and including lenses and cameras, and also education. Now, all of that said, as I do this for a living, I fully expect within the next 3 to 5 years that I'll be upgrading my equipment again. Glass or lenses are the things that you don't upgrade that often, but the bodies you will, and you already see from the camera manufacturers that they're going down the mirrorless route. So when I upgrade, my next camera will most likely be a mirrorless camera, and I believe over time we'll start seeing those DSLRs phased out.